Today on History Play-by-Play, one of my favorite stories, when Nikita Khrushchev visited the United States.
In all alone. Dangle, shot. He scores!
In order to talk about this story, we probably should introduce who Nikita Khrushchev is, because the whole story revolves around who he is as an individual and why he's important to history. And it starts with the death of Joseph Stalin. Stalin had been in power in the Soviet Union for quite a long time at this point. By 1953, he is getting a bit old, and he has a heart attack one night in 1953. And it probably wouldn't have been fatal if it wasn't for something that was very Joseph Stalin. Stalin had a sick, twisted sense of humor, and he played a game with his guards where he'd tell the guards, do not bother me until 7 a.m. for no reasons. Do not bother me. And then he'd have a fit in the middle of the night and call for his guards and act like something was very wrong, and the guards would rush in, and he'd shoot them and say, I told you not to bother me till 7 a.m. He thought that was hilarious. Well, in 1953, when he has an actual cardiac arrest, he calls for his guards, and the guards are like, I'm not falling for that. And so he would pass away in his sleep. It didn't help that he sent away all the doctors to gulags, and there really wasn't anyone who was able or really trusting enough to help and try and limp Stalin along. All of this story is very well captured in the accurate enough movie, a very dark comedy called The Death of Stalin, which is now streaming on multiple places. I recommend it. It's a good time if you appreciate that sense of humor. Now, who comes out of the ongoing fight of, okay, who's going to take over after Stalin, is a former farm boy from Ukraine called Nikita Khrushchev. And Khrushchev, he fought in the Red Army in the Russian Civil War, party commissar, he has the resume. He is going to be the next leader of the Soviet Union. And 3 years, well, I mean, it took some time. 1956, he gives two very important speeches. The first we only learn about later. It's called the Secret Speech, where he talks about de-Stalinization, where basically that he calls out all those pieces that Lenin said against Stalin, that Stalin was against what Lenin was preaching, and that all of the destruction Stalin had done to the country via the gulags and the deportations was bad for Russia. And basically, they all kind of went, oh, we can say that now. And so the beginning of de-Stalinization happened, and Khrushchev definitely won a lot of people over. There's a real paradigm shift in Russian history. The other speech we knew very much about, where Nikita Khrushchev at a speech at the United Nations says that we will bury you, referring to the United States. And the full quote is there, that if you don't like us, don't bother. We're not here to see you. We will bury you. Now, in Europe or any old world kind of conversations, everyone kind of knew that meant that we will be there at your funeral. We will be a pallbearer there to help bury you at your funeral at the cemetery. In America, it was taken that the Russians are going to be the one who are going to do the burying, that they are going to destroy us. They are here to end us. Very different meanings from one phrase, and the context was certainly lost in the United States. Everyone took the much more alarming approach. Khrushchev simply meant that we will outlast the United States, taken very differently. That fully sets up, though, how Khrushchev is perceived in the U.S. Follow that up that same year with two different crises in Europe. There's a revolt in Poland, sometimes referred to as Polish October. It ends with about 100 deaths, and negotiations will follow. Poland will be less directly controlled by the Soviet Union, and I think that is one small domino on the way to Lech Walesa and Solidarity, and Poland being the first to break away in 1989. In Hungary, it's not so nice. This revolt happens within party leadership, not the people. And so Khrushchev rolls in the tanks and crushes it. More than 2,500 are killed. That's the Russian numbers. It's likely far higher. Many, many refugees flee Hungary. It's not a good time. Basically, it's seen that Khrushchev is a big bully. So 2 years later, in trying to thaw some things, in 1958, there are exhibitions being held in Moscow and in the U.S., and Vice President Richard Nixon goes to the American Exposition in Moscow to show off the exhibit and make sure it's finished. As soon as they get there, Khrushchev is complaining about things said in Congress that are anti-Russian, anti-Soviet, about the Warsaw Pact and how the Soviet Union is controlling all those countries. He makes it political very quickly. They, along the way, and Nixon trying to show off, they agree on a debate that would be televised in both America and the Soviet Union. On the way to the studio, Nixon starts talking about the kitchen exhibit. And again, because copyright strikes come when I put in speeches, you get my terrible impressions. Nixon starts talking about that this is the latest model in American kitchens, and we like to make life easier for our women. And Khrushchev immediately retorts back, your capitalistic attitude towards women does not occur under communism. So immediately Khrushchev says that Nixon and capitalism is sexist. That's fun. You don't expect that. Russian women were fighting on the front lines in World War II. A Soviet woman, Valentina Tereshkova, had already been in space. That stuff wouldn't happen for decades in the United States. Nixon tries to back up. I think that attitude towards women is universal. What we want to do is make life easier for our housewives. And this starts getting more and more heated in what becomes known as the kitchen debate. Khrushchev says in Russia that all you have to do to get a house is be someone in the Soviet Union, is to live, and you will get a house. You don't have a right to anything in America. That nothing is given to you, and this becomes even more and more heated. That Richard Nixon, Vice President of the United States, gets up in Khrushchev's face, pointing at him, saying, "If you were in the Senate, we'd call you a filibuster. All the talk, you do all the talking, won't let anyone else talk." And he talks about how it's important, the diversity, we have a right to choose all these different things because America and competition. And Khrushchev's like, none of this goes out of style anyway, it's furniture, furniture is furniture, who cares? And eventually it kind of cools off. Khrushchev starts poking fun. You look angry, you look like you want to fight me. Are you still angry? That's right, I want to fight you. And he goes, well, Nixon was once a lawyer, I see where it comes from. And eventually it gets to this actual televised part, where in this, they end up getting to the studio. It gets even more heated. It keeps going and going. Eventually, Nixon starts talking about, like, well, we have different things we're good at. You're good at rocket engines for space. We're good at color TVs. And Khrushchev is not having any of it. Well, we're fine with that, too. He says, how long has America been around? 150 years. And we've been around 42, and we're almost at the same level. Another 7 years, we will do all this and then pass you by. We will wave hi as we pass you by and say that you please follow behind us. It's a kind of a big deal. Now, all of this will eventually lead to Nixon being much more high profile, but in the end, Nikita Khrushchev looks like someone who's ready to come and argue and someone ready to fight. So when Dwight Eisenhower, president at the time, invites Khrushchev to America to have a tour and see what we're like, just basically he's being nice and returning the hospitality, Khrushchev accepts. And Eisenhower is kind of taken back by that. Like, okay. Then let's go ahead and get that organized. Nikita Khrushchev would be the first Russian leader, in the Russian or Soviet, the whole time, to ever set foot in the United States. And that story is a comedy of errors that gets better and better. So this was the kitchen debate. Next, Khrushchev comes to the United States. That's the end of the episode. What you just saw is this teacher's interpretation of events. If you use this for a class, let me know how that went in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you can figure out how today's jersey matches the content, let me know in the comments. That's extra credit. I'm John Baranowski. Thanks for watching.